Somewhere tonight, in a bed you have never seen, in a room lit only by whatever small light finds its way through curtains that are not yours, someone woke up a few hours ago with their heart pounding slightly, blinking into the darkness, trying to hold on to an image that was already beginning to fade the way dreams always fade, an image of a face. Your face. Not a vague impression, not a blurry, forgettable shape the way most dream faces dissolve the moment you try to look at them directly. Specific. Detailed. Clear enough that when they woke, they lay there for a moment in the dark, oddly certain, oddly moved, by a face they cannot place anywhere in their waking memory, and yet somehow already feels familiar in a way they cannot explain to themselves, let alone to anyone else. They will probably not tell anyone about it tomorrow. It will likely sound strange said out loud, a dream about a stranger's face, difficult to explain without sounding slightly foolish. But they will think about it more than once during the day, catching themselves remembering some small detail, the particular way you smiled, or turned your head, or looked at them across whatever unremarkable dream setting their mind constructed around the two of you. Perhaps the dream placed the two of you somewhere entirely ordinary, a kitchen neither of you actually owns, a street that does not exist anywhere in the waking world, the strange, borrowed geography dreams often construct without explanation. The setting rarely matters as much as the specific clarity of the face within it. Most dreams blur and dissolve the moment a person tries to look directly at anything inside them, faces especially, shifting and reforming the way water refuses to hold a single shape. A face that stays sharp, that holds its exact features even under the direct attention of a dreaming mind trying to study it, is not the ordinary output of an unconscious mind simply processing the day's leftover static. It is closer to something being shown, deliberately, rather than something being randomly generated, the difference between static on a screen and an actual, intentional image someone took the time to place there. I want you to sit with that for a moment before we go any further tonight. While you have been going about your ordinary evening, wondering if anyone out there is thinking about you at all, someone spent part of last night dreaming about your face specifically, in a level of detail their own conscious mind could not have manufactured on its own. You have wondered, more than once, whether the person appointed for you has any sense yet that you exist, whether anything about you has reached them in any form before an actual meeting takes place. Something already has. It reached them last night, while they slept, in a form neither of you fully controls or understands. There is a man in an old story named Gideon, hiding in fear, convinced he was the least qualified person available for the task he had been called to, terrified the night before a battle he did not believe he could actually win. He was told to sneak down to the enemy camp and listen, that he would hear something there that would give him courage. Gideon had every reason to expect that night to end in his own defeat. His army had already been reduced from many thousands down to a mere few hundred men, a number that made no strategic sense against the size of the enemy camp spread out before him like an uncountable swarm. Fear was not an overreaction in his circumstances. It was the only reasonable response to what he could see with his own eyes. And yet he was told to go listen anyway, to walk directly toward the source of his fear rather than away from it. What he overheard was not a message meant for him directly. It was one soldier telling another soldier about a dream, a round loaf of barley bread tumbling into the camp, striking a tent so hard it overturned and collapsed completely. The soldier's companion interpreted it immediately, without hesitation. This is nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given the entire camp into his hand. Consider what this actually means. An enemy soldier, someone who had never met Gideon, someone with no personal knowledge of him, no reason to think about him specifically, had dreamed about him anyway, dreamed something so specific and symbolic that his own companion could interpret it immediately as being unmistakably about Gideon and his coming victory. Gideon was not present for that dream. He had no control over it, no way of causing it, no way of even knowing it would happen. And yet it happened anyway, delivered through a stranger's sleeping mind, at exactly the moment Gideon needed it most, the night before the battle that would define the rest of his life. This is not a message for everyone scrolling past it tonight. It is for the one who has quietly wondered whether they have reached the person appointed for them in any way at all yet. Let tonight be the night you stop assuming you exist only in your own mind, and start believing that somewhere, in ways neither of you controls, you have already begun reaching the one you are waiting for. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from feeling entirely unreachable, as if you exist behind glass, visible perhaps to the people immediately around you, but completely inaccessible to the specific person you actually want to be seen by, the one who has not yet had any way of knowing you exist. You have wondered whether the space between you and your soulmate is simply too large to be crossed by anything but an eventual, ordinary meeting, whether nothing meaningful can actually happen until you are finally standing in the same room, breathing the same air, exchanging actual words. You have felt, on your loneliest nights, entirely contained within your own experience, unable to imagine that anything about you, your hopes, your face, your particular way of laughing, could possibly travel outside the walls of your own life and reach someone else before you have even met them. You have looked at your own reflection some mornings and wondered what it would actually mean for someone, somewhere, to already carry an image of your face before ever standing in front of you in person, whether such a thing is even possible outside of romantic stories designed to comfort people exactly as lonely as you sometimes feel. You have wanted, quietly, almost secretly, to be that memorable to someone, to matter enough, even before meeting, that your face would be the kind worth a mind returning to it unprompted in sleep. And you have felt slightly embarrassed by how much you wanted that, as if wanting to be dreamed about specifically, rather than simply liked eventually, was somehow too much to hope for, too intimate a request to make even in the privacy of your own unspoken prayers. You have also wondered whether wanting to be dreamed about so specifically is simply a sign of how tired you have grown of ordinary, gradual ways of connecting, apps, introductions, chance encounters, all of which require so much visible effort and so much risk of visible rejection. A dream, by comparison, felt like it would arrive without any of that exposure, a form of being wanted that required nothing from you directly, no vulnerability, no risk, simply someone else's unconscious mind doing the reaching on your behalf while you slept peacefully, undisturbed, in your own bed. You have wondered whether dreams like the one I am describing tonight are simply fiction, comforting stories meant to soften the ache of waiting rather than anything that could actually be happening in a real, specific way to a real, specific person somewhere out there thinking, in whatever unconscious way, about you. You have gone to sleep some nights hoping, almost embarrassed by how much you hoped, that you might dream something meaningful yourself, a face, a sign, anything that might feel like confirmation, only to wake with nothing you could remember, and felt the particular disappointment of a night that gave you no evidence at all. You have watched your own dreams fade the moment you wake, the way most dreams do, unable to hold on to details even of the ones that felt significant while you were inside them, and wondered whether whatever might be happening on the other end, in your soulmate's sleeping mind, fades just as quickly and means just as little. You have tried, on certain nights, to consciously will yourself to dream about the person you are waiting for, lying in the dark repeating some version of a request before sleep took you, only to wake the next morning with nothing you could remember, or worse, a dream about something entirely unrelated, mundane, forgettable, work stress or misplaced keys. Nothing resembling the meaningful encounter you had hoped to manufacture through sheer will. That particular kind of forcing rarely works, not because the connection itself is fictional, but because it was never something that could be commanded into existence through effort, the same way Gideon could not have commanded a stranger's dream into happening no matter how much courage he needed that particular night. Have you ever woken from an ordinary night of sleep and felt a strange, specific loneliness settle over you almost immediately, the sense that even your unconscious mind had nothing meaningful to offer you that night, no message, no sign, simply the blank exhaustion of ordinary rest? I have watched every one of those quiet mornings, beloved. I was never absent from a single one of them, even the ones that felt entirely empty to you. If these words have found the exact place in you that has felt entirely unreachable by the person you are waiting for, let it be known, even if only to me, in the quiet of this moment. You have already begun reaching them, in ways you do not control and cannot verify, the same way an unnamed soldier's dream reached Gideon on the exact night he needed it most. So you have tried to manufacture that same sense of connection yourself. Of course you have. A heart that longs to be known by someone not yet met will reach for anything that promises a bridge across that particular distance. You have written letters to a future person you have not met, poured private hope into pages you never intended to send, hoping the act of writing itself might somehow create the connection you were longing for, even while knowing, rationally, that the letter would never actually reach anyone. You have prayed specifically for a sign, a dream, some form of confirmation that the person appointed for you was real and already thinking of you in some form, and felt discouraged on the mornings that particular prayer seemed to go unanswered, when no dream came, when nothing shifted, when the ordinary silence of waking life continued exactly as it had before. You have researched, more than once, what it might mean when someone dreams about a person they have not met, reading articles late at night, half hoping to find something that would validate the very specific hope you were carrying, only to close the browser more uncertain than when you opened it. You have also told a close friend about a particularly vivid dream you once had, watching their face carefully for some sign that they took it as seriously as you secretly did, only to receive a polite, mildly amused response that quietly discouraged you from bringing it up again, teaching you, wrongly, that this particular hope was better kept to yourself from then on. You tucked it away after that, still believing it privately, but no longer willing to risk the small vulnerability of saying it out loud to anyone who might respond the same dismissive way, protecting the hope by keeping it silent rather than continuing to expose it to people who were never going to understand its weight the way you did. You have also, at times, dismissed the entire idea, deciding it was easier to believe none of this actually happens, that dreams are simply the mind processing ordinary information, protecting yourself from the vulnerability of hoping for something as unprovable and delicate as a stranger's dream about your face. There was a season where you settled fully into that dismissal, deciding it was simply more mature, more grounded, to stop believing in this particular kind of unseen connection altogether, treating anyone who spoke of such things as naive or overly romantic. That dismissal felt protective at the time, a way of guarding yourself against hoping for something you could never actually verify. But somewhere underneath the dismissal, the hope never actually left. It simply went quiet, the way a light left on in an empty room still burns even when no one is there to see it, waiting patiently for the day someone would finally walk back in and notice it had never actually gone out. None of this makes you foolish, beloved. It makes you someone who wanted to be reached across an impossible distance badly enough to try every available way of confirming it was happening. This is not a moral failing. It is simply what long waiting does to people who were built for connection and have felt unreachable by the specific person they are waiting for. But none of those paths actually gave you the confirmation you were looking for, did they? The letters were never sent. The prayers for a specific sign often went unanswered in the exact form you requested. The research left you more uncertain, not less. None of it was ever going to work through your own effort, because this particular kind of reaching was never something you could manufacture on your own. The soldier who dreamed about Gideon had no idea his sleeping mind was doing anything significant that night. He almost certainly woke, mentioned the dream to his companion out of simple curiosity or unease, and had no framework for understanding that his own unconscious mind had just become the exact mechanism through which courage would be delivered to a terrified man hiding in the shadows nearby. Consider how easily this particular moment could have gone unrecorded entirely. If Gideon had not been told to go down and listen, if he had arrived at the camp moments earlier or later, if the soldier had simply kept the dream to himself instead of mentioning it to his companion, the entire exchange, and the courage it delivered, might never have reached the person it was actually meant for. But Gideon was told to go, and he went, and he arrived at precisely the moment the dream was being spoken aloud, close enough to overhear a message that was never directly addressed to him but was entirely, unmistakably, about him. Notice what Gideon did immediately upon hearing the dream and its interpretation. He worshipped. He did not demand further proof, did not ask for a second confirmation, did not require the dream to repeat itself before he was willing to act on what he had just overheard. One dream, spoken by a stranger who had no idea he was being listened to, was enough to move Gideon from paralyzing fear directly into decisive action, waking his men immediately and declaring that victory had already been given. The speed of that transformation is worth sitting with. An entire military campaign, an entire outcome that had felt impossible only hours earlier, pivoted on a single overheard sentence from someone Gideon never even met face to face, someone whose name is not even recorded in the story. There is something worth noticing, too, in the fact that Gideon needed to actually leave the safety of his own camp in order to receive this particular encouragement. It was not delivered to him where he was already comfortable, already hidden, already safe. He had to walk toward the very source of his fear in order to be in position to overhear what he needed to hear. Sometimes the confirmation a person needs is genuinely already circulating nearby, but receiving it requires a willingness to move toward uncertainty rather than remaining in the safety of not knowing. This is what I want you to understand about your own situation tonight. You are not waiting for a meeting to happen before any real connection can exist. Something has already begun crossing the distance between you and your soulmate, through channels neither of you fully controls, the same way that dream crossed the distance between an unnamed soldier's sleeping mind and a terrified man hiding nearby, delivered at exactly the moment it was needed most. You have not been unreachable this entire time, my child. You have already begun reaching the person appointed for you, quietly, through means you cannot measure or verify, the same way Gideon was reached before he had any evidence his victory was actually coming. Let me show you something that has already begun happening, quietly, in ways you cannot currently confirm. There was a night recently where you woke suddenly for no clear reason, heart beating slightly faster than usual, with the vague, unplaceable sense that something significant had just happened, though you could not remember any specific dream to account for the feeling. That unexplained waking was not nothing. Some of what moves between two connected people happens in forms too subtle for either side to fully articulate afterward, registering only as an unexplained shift in the body rather than a clear memory in the mind. There was also a recent moment where a stranger's face, glimpsed briefly in passing, a crowd, a photograph, a video, caused an unexpected, disproportionate reaction in you, a flicker of recognition you could not account for, quickly dismissed as nothing. Small collisions like that are not always nothing. Sometimes they are evidence that your own mind has already begun forming an image of someone you have not yet met, an image close enough to something real that fragments of it occasionally surface unexpectedly in your waking life. There was also a moment, perhaps weeks ago now, where you caught yourself smiling for no clear reason in the middle of an entirely unrelated task, a small unexplained lightness passing through you that lifted as quickly as it arrived. You likely attributed it to nothing in particular, a passing good mood, a stray pleasant thought. Consider that some of what lifts through you without explanation may be arriving from somewhere outside your own immediate circumstances entirely, small waves of something crossing the same distance the dream crossed, registering in you as nothing more specific than an unexplained moment of lightness. Consider, too, that you have likely been on the other side of this same experience before, without recognizing it for what it was. A face surfacing in your own sleep, oddly specific, belonging to no one you could immediately place, dismissed the next morning as simply a strange, forgettable dream, filed away and never thought of again. Some of those unplaceable faces may not have been random constructions of your own resting mind. Some of them may have been exactly what I am describing tonight, someone else's face reaching you the same way yours is now reaching them, arriving quietly, without any explanation you were equipped to recognize at the time. Someone else you love may be having their own version of this unexplained experience right now, an unaccountable feeling, an unplaceable sense of connection, and they may need to hear these words too, not because you explain the mechanics of it to them, but because they see in you what it looks like to trust connection that cannot yet be fully proven. There was also a specific song recently that caught you off guard, playing somewhere ordinary, a store, a car radio, a friend's playlist, that stirred something in you disproportionate to the moment, a feeling closer to anticipation than nostalgia, though you could not have explained exactly what you were anticipating. You let it pass without examining it too closely, the way you let most inexplicable feelings pass, filing it under simply being in an odd mood that day. Feelings like that are not always as random as they seem. Sometimes they are the waking echo of something that happened somewhere else entirely, in sleep, in spirit, in whatever unseen place these connections first begin forming before they ever become visible enough for either person to consciously notice. This is how I tend to work far more often than people expect, not always through obvious, verifiable signs, but through subtle crossings that happen in sleep, in unexplained feelings, in flickers of recognition neither person can fully account for, the exact same quiet mechanism that once carried courage from an enemy soldier's dream to a frightened man crouched in the darkness nearby. Do you remember the face I described at the very beginning of this, held briefly in someone's memory the moment they woke, already fading, already difficult to fully explain to anyone who might ask about it the next day? That face was yours. Not a symbol, not a metaphor standing in for some abstract idea of love, but an actual, specific reaching across the distance that currently separates you from the person appointed for you, delivered in the one place where distance and time do not fully apply the way they do in ordinary waking life. I have watched every quiet morning you woke feeling unreached, beloved, every disappointed absence of a sign you had specifically hoped for. None of that absence meant nothing was happening. It simply meant the specific form you were hoping for had not yet been the form this particular reaching was taking. Here is what I need you to carry with you when this message ends and your ordinary evening resumes around you. Last night, your soulmate dreamed of your face in perfect detail. Say that to yourself slowly, and let it settle past every morning you woke feeling entirely unreached by the person you are waiting for. Something has already crossed the distance between you, delivered through a channel neither of you controls, the same way courage once crossed an impossible distance to reach a man who believed himself entirely alone the night before his greatest victory. You have not been unreachable this entire time. You have already begun appearing, specifically, vividly, in the place where distance does not yet apply, and that reaching is closer to becoming visible in your waking life than your discouragement has allowed you to believe. Come close now, and let me pray this over you the way I have wanted to pray it over every quiet, unexplained crossing already happening between you and the one appointed for you. Father, I bring before you the one listening tonight, the one who has quietly wondered whether they have reached the person they are waiting for in any form at all, the one who has felt entirely contained within their own experience, unreachable, unseen, unknown. I ask for wisdom, that they would recognize the subtle evidence of this connection when it appears, rather than dismissing every unexplained feeling or flicker of recognition as simple coincidence. I ask for protection over their heart in what remains of this waiting, protection from the doubt that whispers they exist entirely alone, unreachable by anyone until an ordinary meeting finally happens. I ask for courage, the kind it took Gideon to actually go down to that enemy camp and listen, trusting an instruction that made no obvious sense, rather than remaining safely hidden in his own fear and uncertainty. I ask for healing over every place this particular waiting has bruised them, every morning they woke with no sign to hold on to, every quiet embarrassment about hoping for something as delicate and unprovable as a stranger's dream. I ask for faith to be renewed tonight, not a fragile faith that needs a remembered dream in order to believe connection is happening, but a steady faith that can trust the crossing is real even while the evidence remains largely invisible. I ask for restoration, for whatever this particular waiting has cost them, the willingness to believe in forms of connection they cannot fully measure or prove, the openness to hope for something as tender as being dreamed about by someone they have not yet met. Give it back gently, the way you always restore what long doubt has worn thin. I ask that they would stop apologizing for how much they want to be dreamed about, how much they want to matter to someone before that someone has even had the chance to meet them in person. Let them release the embarrassment that has made them keep this particular hope quiet after being gently dismissed by people who could not understand its weight. This longing was never foolish. It was simply tender, and tender things are not always meant to be spoken about loudly. They are meant to be protected, quietly, until the exact moment they are finally ready to be seen. I ask for provision, in every part of their life this waiting has touched, so that the nights spent feeling entirely unreached were never wasted nights, but nights in which real, quiet crossing was already happening, even without their conscious awareness of it. I ask for discernment, that when evidence of this connection finally becomes visible in their waking life, they would recognize its significance rather than dismissing it as coincidence simply because it did not arrive in the exact form they had originally hoped for. I ask for breakthrough over the timing itself, that the distance between this quiet, unseen reaching and an actual, waking meeting would close now, at the appointed hour, the same way the distance between a soldier's dream and Gideon's victory closed within a single night. I ask for their family, for peace in the relationships this long, quiet waiting has strained, for the ones who would not understand this particular kind of hope if it were explained to them, for the ones who have simply stopped asking how the waiting is going. I ask for their future, that whatever this quiet reaching has been building toward would arrive in a way they are fully able to receive and trust, rather than doubting it simply because its earliest form was too delicate and unprovable to hold on to fully. I ask that in the meantime, they would remain gently attentive to their own unexplained feelings and unremembered nights, not obsessively searching for meaning in every ordinary moment, but simply staying open to the possibility that some of what moves through them without clear explanation is not random at all, but part of a quiet, ongoing crossing that has already begun and will continue until the day it finally becomes fully visible. Let them hold this possibility lightly, with curiosity rather than anxious searching, trusting the reaching to continue its own quiet work without requiring their constant, watchful attention in order to keep happening. I ask for peace over them tonight, peace that does not require a remembered dream or a clear sign in order to feel real, peace that can trust the crossing has already begun even while its evidence remains largely hidden from view. And I ask for spiritual strength, that they would not grow weary in these final days of unseen connection, that they would remain open, remain hopeful, remain exactly the kind of person capable of being reached in the quiet, unconscious ways this reaching often first arrives. I ask, Father, that every night spent feeling entirely unreached would be redeemed rather than resented, so that when the connection finally becomes visible in waking life, this whole season of quiet crossing becomes part of the wonder this new chapter is built on, rather than a period of doubt it has to quietly work around. If you have said yes to this prayer somewhere inside you tonight, even quietly, even without any memory of your own dreams to confirm it, let that yes be enough. Child, hear me now, in the stillness that remains after this prayer. You were never entirely unreachable, sealed off within your own experience with no way of crossing the distance to the person you are waiting for. Something has already begun crossing that distance, quietly, in the place where sleep and spirit meet, the same way courage once crossed an impossible distance to reach a frightened man the night before everything changed for him. Your face has already been seen, somewhere, in perfect detail, by the one appointed for you. Rest tonight. Not because you can fully verify this crossing yet, but because it was never dependent on your ability to verify it in order to be real. Go in peace, and let this quiet reaching become trust instead of continued longing for proof, the same trust it must have taken Gideon to worship first and ask questions only afterward. Carry this gently into the ordinary days ahead of you, the unexplained waking in the middle of the night, the unaccountable flicker of recognition toward a stranger's face, the sense of connection you have felt but could never quite justify with evidence. None of it was nothing. All of it was part of the same quiet crossing already happening between you and the one appointed for you. You are seen. You are known, even in the place where you sleep. And somewhere, last night, your face was already, quietly, remembered, the way courage was once remembered on the exact night a frightened man needed it most.